Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Shlomo Ben Ami is a former Israeli foreign minister. He's written an op-ed about, of course, what's happening in Gaza, and then also what's happening in the West in response to what's happening in Gaza in the wake of the October 7th terrorist attack. And I'm particularly interested in recounting what he had to say, because he's a Labour Party guy. He was. He's a critic of Bibi and Likud. He notes, though, the ahistorical basis for so much of this protesting and violence and ignorant chanting. Perhaps Israeli peace activists and progressive Zionists, he being one, are targeted for boycotts and retractions precisely because they challenge simplistic anti-Zionist narratives, which position Zionism as necessarily racist and purely evil. These narratives are often underpinned by a discourse of totalitarian political correctness in pro-Palestinian circles that is unscrupulously indifferent to the nuances of history. For example, Canadian Jewish author Naomi Klein discusses the mass displacement and dispossession of Palestinians in 1948, but makes no reference to the war that had been declared by the Palestinians and neighboring Arab countries in response to the 1947 UN resolution partitioning Palestine into two states, one Arab and one Jewish. She also, does Klein, accuses Israel of regarding Palestinian children as a demographic threat without acknowledging that it was PLO leader Yasser Arafat, a Nobel Prize winner, I might add, which I say critically, right, who first referred to the womb of the Palestinian mother as the best weapon of the Palestinian people. That was a quote. Jewish anti-Zionism is as old as Zionism. Rosa Luxemburg, Leon Trotsky, Karl Kautsky, the members of the General Jewish Labor Bund, and many others got there before Klein. Founding scholars of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, such as Gershom Scholem and Judah Magnus, and luminaries like Hannah Arendt, supported a bi-national Jewish-Arab state, which the Palestinians opposed. Then there are the millions of Israelis who've been demonstrating for 7 months now against the messianic Zionism embedded by Bibi. But these very people are also Zionists, and they are the only hope for peace. He goes on to talk about the sins Israel has committed in the occupied territories and the need for Palestinian emancipation. However, he says that those who are purporting to want peace, it might not be peace they want. The tendency to declare every Israeli to be nothing more than a mouthpiece for power seems to betray the most fervent anti-Zionist ultimate goal, canceling Israel. Anti-Zionism might not be a synonym for anti-Semitism, but both are seemingly incurable pathologies. Well, sure, because in this distinction that's always attempted to be made by the fork-tongued anti-Semites. Oh, I'm not anti-Jewish people. I'm anti-Zionism. I'm anti the state of Israel, or I'm not even anti-Zionism. I'm anti the Bibi regime in Israel. But then you hear the things they say, and it's about as credible as those people characterizing themselves as anti-war protesters who are at the same time calling for the annihilation of the Jews. It's just not credible. And we see this, perhaps, if you pay attention, you knew, but people are seeing this laid bare throughout our institutions, including their dear alma maters, in ways maybe that have gone unnoticed before.
Yeah, right now they're currently still taking down the encampment at DePaul that was up for way too long. They should have put a stop to that. And then last night at UC, University of California, Irvine, listen to this professor who's embedded with the kids.
We cannot have a genocidal foreign policy in a democracy. These young people are going to be the ones that have to pay the price for these horrible decisions.
Yeah, by the way, the genocide that's supposedly going on there, the Palestinian population in Israel has increased by something like ninefold since 1948. It's an odd approach to genocide. But again, this is ahistorical, afactual, and
Emotionally unstable, I'd say, too.
well,
That lady was.
that's the tip of the iceberg there. Amoral, just generally speaking, but this is about an ideological movement that is even bigger than anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is just a feature, but it's not the whole story, as we talked about with Heather McDonald earlier this week. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Natan Sharansky, former Soviet dissident and Israeli politician, chairman of the advisory boards of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement and the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Mr. Sharansky, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
What's your reaction to, in particular, what the former Israeli foreign minister had to say about this distinction without a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism?
Well, first of all, I have to say that Shlomo Ben-Ami is an outstanding intellectual, outstanding professor, very interesting person. But when it comes to politics, I believe he's absolute failure. We were in the same government when he was foreign minister and I was minister of internal affairs. And Shlomo had a secret negotiations with Palestinians and Yasser Arafat, which I had to unmask. We found out that he was the architect of proposals, including giving to Arafat half of Jerusalem. And with this proposal, Ehud Barak went to Camp David, and of course found that Yasser Arafat said no when President Clinton and Ehud Barak tried to convince him to agree. Why he said no? Because he wanted destruction of Israel, only Israel, from the river to the sea. And his answer was Second Intifada and the awful war and the awful wave of terrorism. So we have to learn from this experience of Ehud Barak and Shlomo Ben-Ami.
Well, right. I mean, it seems to me one of the lessons, and you could the subtext of that op-ed from that I was referencing, is basically appeasement. It's sort of decrying the ahistorical and ignorant characterization of Israel and the Israelis, but at the same time, it's appeasement of forces that you're characterizing as wanting one thing when it's pretty clear they want something very different.
Yeah, well, the real peace cannot be reached by appeasement of the terrorists. Right. That was a mistake of Oslo. That was a mistake of proposal in Camp David. That was the mistake of disengagement. And by the way, not only I'm for peace, I was speaking about two-state solutions 25 years ago, but it cannot be a state of terrorists. It cannot be a state which aim is to destroy us. It can be only civil society which is ready for coexistence. And it's not happening. It's not even close to this.
I wonder, as a former Soviet dissident, it's always interesting to talk to those who lived behind the Iron Curtain. If what you see in the West today and how reminiscent it is of what you lived through in Eastern Europe back in the day.
Yes, well, thank you for asking. Look, I'm very alarmed. And first, I started my alarm about what's happening in the universities 20 years ago, when I had a trip over American universities and discovered that we have a phenomenal double thing, that so many students are afraid to speak on behalf of Israel because they believe that it would be dangerous for their career. And they thought, my God, it's not in Soviet Union. It's in the most free country in the world, in the academia of America. That was the beginning. What happened later with so-called woke movement, it's exactly, if you would, in the expression critical race theory, will replace lower race to the word class, you would get one-to-one neo-Marxism, Leninism. this attempt to divide all the world on the press and the press, and that the press is always right, and the press is always wrong, and we should not permit to oppress even to speak. It's typical neo-Marxism, which, not surprisingly, it brings us to so-called political correctness, which means that only party lines can be expressed publicly, and everybody who is not in accordance with this party line has to be punished, and to pure primitive anti-Semitism, because totalitarian theories need the enemy, and it is so easy to say that Israel and Jews, they are the enemy, and Palestinians are the victims. And as a result, those extreme Islamic forces, which want really destruction of the state of Israel, are suddenly united with so-called progressive, and I call them Marxist-Leninist forces, for whom the attacks on Israel, even more than torture of Israelis, that's part of the liberation. No, from the river to the sea, they say, oh, they don't know what river and what sea. It doesn't matter. They want liberation of every river and every sea in the world. They really don't understand what it means. Like in Soviet Union, Bolsheviks didn't understand what communism means. But they knew that that's something that we all have to fight.
Well, and in the Soviet Union, I mean, this is sort of a cautionary. I mean, there's so many aspects of it that's a cautionary tale. But one is, the Mensheviks were actually the more popular political party, but somehow the Bolsheviks won the day. And it's sort of a reminder. I mean, for me, but you give me your perspective. It's a reminder that this element, this fringe element, they're small in number. They don't pose a particular threat. But if you sort of spend a lot of time navel gazing, as many in the West are wont to do, then what becomes a fringe element and a marginal threat turns out to be, the occupying power.
Yeah, I have to say that Bolsheviks, when they came to power, for some people, for intelligentsia, for many Jews, it seemed like something very positive. After all, they're speaking about freedom for everybody, about equality, that only the state equipped with Marxism-Leninism can bring this equality by establishing control on every aspect of life. And there were many so-called, as they call them, true believers who wanted to believe that is really progressive, that's really good for all the people. Very quickly, they found out that this regime is trying to rule, to control people with the help of fear. And then most of Soviet people became double thinkers, meaning that they're afraid to say the truth, but they don't believe in all these theories. The fact that more and more people in America are afraid publicly to express their opinions is very dangerous fact. And when the real revolution happens, then many double thinkers are moving to dissent, are ready to say publicly what is wrong. This black-white picture of the world divided only on oppressors and the press, and that people, by their own identity, can belong already to one or another group, the more people will be ready to revolt against it, to criticize it, the more is the chance that there will be some fundamental change, and this totalitarian neo-Marxist theory will be defeated.
Yeah. Equality for the classes, that was the promise of the Bolsheviks. Equity along racial or gender identity lines, that's the promise of the new Marxists. It's the same playbook, isn't it?
Yeah, well, of course. In fact, they were speaking about equity and not equality, that not equal opportunities, but equal distribution. And the state will decide what it means. They will take everything from the citizens, and then they distribute in different way. And that, in fact, that meant that it brought to the real dictatorship. And we have to go back to liberalism, to equality, to equality in opportunities, to encourage initiative, and that's what finally defeated Soviet system. And that's what America has to go to its basic values of human rights, fundamental human rights of people, to compete freely, to express their views, whatever they are, and have a full free life and a life in accordance with their identities.
Natan Sharansky, former Soviet dissident and Israeli politician, chairman of the advisory boards of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement and the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. And you can check out most recent op-ed from him, The Fight for Freedom from Exodus to Gaza, that was published by the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Sharansky, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
At Signature Bank, going the distance for business banking customers is what we do every day. We understand that business owners have a strategic mission, a drive to succeed, a plan for growth, and don't have time to wait for a bank to respond. With Signature